prophecy has been completed, so to speak, then it ends. Then you would have to say, just like you said, you'd have to say that that atoning blood stopped after it happened.
Yeah, it makes no sense. Real quick, our YouTube is up, so if you're just joining us on YouTube or you're starting to watch this video, you didn't miss much. We got a little bit of late start trying to get this thing up and going. So our topic is, how do we know all prophecy was fulfilled in 70? That's the general topic anyway. Okay, sorry about that. So YouTube is up and going, Restoration Movement 2.0.
Okay, so
finally, after nearly 30 minutes.
Is the historical aspect of Christ's crucifixion, which it was a prophecy, is it fulfilled? Yes, it's fulfilled. Like I said, Christ was offered once. The book of Hebrews says he was offered once for sin. There's not going to be another offering for sin. And then when he was going to come, it was for salvation. Well, that salvation is perpetual because time is perpetual. Or what? For some reason, I can't pronounce that. Perpetual.
Yeah, you got
perpetual. It. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so close enough.
There are prophecies that are fulfilled in a sense of historical aspects, but do continue on perpetually.
Right.
And one is the atoning blood of the sacrifice.
Another is the church and its work.
And another is the Lord's Supper.
That's right. And baptism.
But in the Church of Christ, the futurists among us will always say, now, 1 Corinthians 11:26 means, because it says that we do show the Lord's death until he come, then it means that we don't take the Lord's Supper anymore. They say that it ends.
Yeah.
But then they use other passages in the Bible, in the New Testament, which use the same word until, and then they say, no, it means continually. So, of course, everything is done by context. So let's put that out there. But, so this whole idea of the Lord's Supper ending at his coming is a farce.
That's right.
Because Christ said this was the blood of his New Testament, of his new covenant, blood of his new covenant for us. Well, who are in the new covenant? The Christians. So it's never ending for the Christian to take it. Okay.
Yeah.
So
can I address this real quick?
Sure.
Jack Holt makes a comment. He says, most of us who believe in full preterism believe we go to the Hadean world on death. Well, then you believe that the old law is still standing. You disagree with the fulfillment of prophecy in Revelation chapter 20 and the clear statement of when the Hadean realm was destroyed. You deny the power of the blood of Jesus to reunite us with our Father when we were separated from our sins. There's many things here that that you may not even realize that you're doing. And you know, Christianity, those are the basic tenets of Christianity: being with our Father, and that Jesus took that separation away. The separation was the Hadean realm. Now, so let me put it this way. We're often, tell me what you think about this, or tell everybody what you think. We're often chided for not being Christians, that we're very unchristian. People call us Satanists, so on. But let me ask you this. How Christian of a belief is it to say that Jesus and his blood and his sacrifice was not enough to reunite us with our Father? I just don't think y'all are thinking this through. And that never made sense to me anyway. It was, I mean,
well, there's significance in the veil being torn in the temple.
That's right.
When he was crucified. There's a significance in when Josephus said that there was voices heard in the temple in 66 AD where it said, let us leave hence. You know, it wasn't any voices from humans in there. Those were spiritual voices speaking through the temple.
Yeah.
So,
hi, Tanya Elliott, by the way. Gotta say hey to you.
But you know, Jack, there's one thing about the Hadean realm. I want to know where you're getting this information that Christians go to the Hadean realm. Is it in Scripture? Because the only Scripture that I see that specifically mentions anything about the Hadean realm and those being in there specifically was talking about the rich man and Lazarus. Now, there could have been, if we want to assume that there were other people in there, but all we know for sure at that time that Hades, especially in Abraham's bosom, was for the Jews. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't for the Christians. I'm just saying that in this particular parable that Christ was speaking, number one, the man was in fine purple. Only the kings wore that. The priests, the high priests, wore that in the temple, and they were considered to be kings. The high priests were in Jerusalem. Okay, the Lazarus, he was set at this rich man's gate daily, looking to be fed from crumbs from his table. And then when this rich man appeals to Abraham, because it says that Lazarus was carried by the angels to Abraham's bosom, and he looks up and he speaks directly to Abraham, and he starts pleading with Abraham, first of all, for Lazarus to come and cool his tongue. And then secondly, he appeals to him to send Lazarus to his brothers. But Abraham says a couple of things. No, he can't come to you, number one. You can't come to us, number two. He's not going to be raised because you have Moses to tell your brothers and your family about.
That's right.
And if they won't hear Moses, they're not going to hear someone who rose from Hades. So everything about this, where we're talking specifically about the Hadean realm in Luke 16, is all Israel, all Jewish centered. So show me in scripture where it says Christians or whatever. You may appeal to Revelation. It's about the only place I can remember seeing it where it says death and hell were emptied up and they were thrown into the lake of fire.
I want to, let's use this. Let's use this idea of heaven. Since we're on it, I had written down 3 things that I was going to talk about to illustrate when we would know all the events of prophecy were fulfilled in 70 or by 70. So let's just make this one of them. So this will be 5. And we're going to get to all these, but let's try. Okay, understanding Jack, and I'm going to refer to you specifically because I know for many years you have preached the gospel and you've been faithful to the Lord. I know that. You've been telling people that heaven is their home. They believed that so much to the point that 90%, I'm going to say this, if they're honest, this is my estimation of things based on what I've seen. 90% of the people sitting in the pews in the Church of Christ know that when they die, that they do not go to the Hadean realm. They believe that they go to heaven. Now, I take a little exception with that phrase, but I'm going to use it. Go to heaven. In other words, heaven is their reality. I would be better with that. But brother, you've got some problems. And anyone who believes that you go to the Hadean realm when you die has some serious issues to get over. Paul said he had a crown of righteousness laid up for him. Now, is that crown of righteousness in the Hadean realm? No. Matter of fact, it's the same crown that the brethren at Smyrna had, Revelation chapter 2 and verse 10, laid up for them. Be faithful till death, and you'll receive the crown of righteousness. Now, Michael Erickson just made a good point that Christians in that interim period from Jesus's death on the cross and resurrection until his return, as you believe, did go to the Hadean realm. It's just we know because Jesus said he's coming back in their lifetime. They're going to see him, that this has already happened, as evidenced by the fact that Hades has been emptied. Now, let me make one point real quick. If you are in Jesus Christ, now, if you believe in baptism, you believe in a preterist concept of resurrection. You have to see resurrection from Romans chapter 6 and 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Here's a resurrection that is going to take place that places us in Jesus Christ. It did in the first century. It does today. Just Ephesians chapter 2. Okay, so you should already understand this. But Ephesians chapter 2 says in verse 6 that and raised us up with him and seated us with him in the heavenly. Now, if you are in Jesus Christ, according to Galatians 3:26 and 27, you're clothed in him, you're seated with him in the heavenly, and Jesus sits at the right hand of the Father. How on earth can you today be separated from him in the Hadean realm and separated from your Father? That math doesn't add up. I'm no math scholar, but I know one thing. That doesn't add. It simply doesn't add. Now, here's something else that you're going to have to contend with. Heaven was opened according to Revelation. Now, from the amillennial position in the Church of Christ, and as I recall, our brother Jack here is somewhat of a partial preterist. I think he told me that once. And he said that he kind of may lean a little bit more towards preterism than partial preterism. If I'm misquoting you, I apologize that I'm not trying to do that, but I'm just trying to establish where you're coming from, where I'm going. So knowing that most people when in the Church of Christ that try to interpret Revelation, they say, well, the first 3 chapters through the 7 churches are dealing with things in the first century. Not all. Then they'll say and that would be in accord with the first question in Matthew 24 and verse 3. Then they say John is dealing with the second question in Matthew 24 and verse 3. And by the way, this is all false. I'm telling you, this is just what the amillennial Church of Christ position generally is. And then the body of Revelation from 4 through chapter 20 is dealing with it really just depends who you talk to. It's dealing with the second question, which would put it in the future at some point. And then the last part is dealing with the future return and destruction of the world. Now, that is not at all the way Revelation is laid out. As a matter of fact, when you look at Revelation, so we're going to look at the body of Revelation, the part that's supposed to be dealt with already. So in Revelation chapter 11 and verse 19, it says, "And the temple of God, which is in heaven, was opened." Okay, so how do you have the temple open? Okay, we're going to have to really examine this. If the temple is in heaven and it's opened, what does that mean about the earthly temple? Well, here's what it means about the earthly temple. In Hebrews chapter 9, if you look at verses 8 and 9, it says clearly the Holy Spirit is signifying this, that the way into the holy place has not yet been disclosed while the outer tabernacle is still standing. So while the physical outer tabernacle is still standing, the way into the holy place has not been disclosed. Ready for this? Which is a symbol for the present time. So here's what this says. You've got this age of Moses. And if you're going to say this is the age of Christianity, then this is a serious problem, because you're saying Christianity existed while the temple was in existence. And that is not what this passage is saying. And you're saying that Christianity comes to an end when the physical temple is destroyed. Just examine this. And here's exactly what this is saying. This is saying, Hebrews 9, verses 8 and 9, that while the physical tabernacle is still standing, and that physical tabernacle is a representation of spiritual heaven, right? Josephus admits that, says that. There's nobody that's going to deny this. But verse 23 says, "Therefore it was necessary for the copies of the things in the heavens to be cleansed with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. For Christ did not enter a holy place made with hands, a mere copy of the true one, but into heaven itself." So the tabernacle was a copy of the true heaven. The Holy of Holies was supposed to represent where God dwelt. I don't think anybody's going to deny that. Now, back to verses 8 and 9. So here's what you see. When the temple is destroyed, there is the sign, and this helps to answer our question. There's the sign or the symbol, ready for this, that Jesus had come, the sacrifice had been accepted, salvation has come, so many things. The resurrection had taken place. There's your sign. So for the people who cared to listen to what Jesus had said in the Olivet Discourse, they understood what Jesus was clearly saying. These things are going to take place in your lifetime. When you see Jerusalem surrounded, realize your redemption is drawing near. That's from Luke's account in chapter 21. Realize that your redemption is drawing near. And this means, here's what's taking place. The resurrection is taking place, the return of the Lord is taking place, and the day of judgment is taking place. That's what Hebrews 9 is talking about. So while that temple stands, you know those things haven't taken place. So you get a real problem in the amillennial position, because you're going to have to revert to premillennialism like the churches of Christ were about 100 years ago before Foy Wallace did his work. And you're going to have to go back to that, Jack. And you're going to have to say, well, I guess we're going to have to be looking for the man of sin or the Antichrist, whatever. And we're going to have to wait for Rome to be reconstituted and the temple to be rebuilt. And you just have a plethora of problems. Back to Revelation chapter 11. Notice what it says in Revelation 11. Verse 1, there was given to me a measuring rod like a staff, and someone said to me, get up and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship in it. Were they worshiping in the temple at the altar? Yes, there were people worshiping in it. Leave out the court, which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it's been given to the nations, and they will tread underfoot the holy city for 42 months. Had the holy city been tread underfoot for 42 months yet by the Gentiles? Nope. This was yet to come. When this happens, the temple of God, verse 19, is opened. The temple of God, which is in heaven, was opened, and the ark of his covenant appeared in the temple. Now, look at Revelation chapter 15. This is supposed to be in the section of Revelation that most people that take the amillennial position believe has already happened. Well, apparently they didn't read enough. Revelation chapter 15, notice the last verse. And the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power. Well, our Old Testament studies reveal that when we see this smoke or this cloud, it's the presence of the Lord. Okay? So check this out. And no one was able to enter the temple until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were finished. So once all of the 7 plagues, these 7s were all, you got, help me out here, Trent. You got the 7 trumpets. You got the 7 bowls of wrath. You've got the 7 seals. What am I missing? I'm sure I'm missing something. So I'm trying to think too fast. That doesn't work very good for me. So you've got all these symbolic, all these symbols, all right? And heaven's not open until they are all completed. Were they all completed? The fact is, yes, they were all completed. Revelation chapter 17 says that things were all done. It talks about the time when this was written. It talks about it being at the time of before the destruction of Jerusalem. There's just so much here. The time of these 7 mountains, when Jerusalem sat on 7 mountains. And yes, it's Jerusalem. And yes, it did set on 7 mountains, just like so many other ancient cities and modern cities. In verse 9, talks about there being 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. That puts it squarely before the destruction of Jerusalem, as when it was written. There's just too much here. Okay, but here's the crown in this teaching. Then I'm going to shut up, and you can fill in all my gaps here.
Oh, you're doing a good job.
Revelation chapter 20. I actually had this one written down. So Revelation chapter 20, which is where the question is about the Hadean realm. Revelation chapter 20 says in verse 7, when the 1,000 years are completed. So when are these 1,000 years going to be completed? Well, let's look and see. Satan will be released from his prison and will come out to deceive the nations which are in the 4 corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, together for the war. The number of them is like the sand of the seashore. And they came up on the broad plain of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city, and fire came down from heaven and devoured them. Okay, who surrounded the camp of the saints of the beloved city? Well, what's the beloved city? It was Jerusalem. There's no question about that. We can look back in history and see when Jerusalem was surrounded for the last time. That was 2,000 years ago about, and that's when it was destroyed. Nobody disputes that. Keep in mind, we read in Hebrews 9, when the temple is destroyed, then you know all of these things have taken place. Look at what we read in Revelation 11, Revelation 15. Are there still bowls yet, or these 7 seals yet to be broken? No. Revelation chapter 22, John was told, break the seal, or don't seal it up, for the time is near. Daniel was told, seal it up because the time is far away. That was only what? Not even 600 years.
Yeah.
So,
About 600.
yeah, there's no way that we can get around this. But this gets even better. So, Jackie, let's listen close. And I appreciate you. I really do. I appreciate what you've done for the Lord. And I know you to be a good man. I know that. But you're wrong in your eschatology. Let's keep reading. So they've surrounded the camp of the saints of the beloved city. Fire comes down and devours them. Verse 10. So the devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire. Well, what's the lake of fire? If the devil's thrown into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are also, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. Okay. Now, wait a minute. This happens at the time of the destruction of Jerusalem, as we've already outlined. Verse 11. Then I saw a great white throne. Is this the judgment scene? Of course it is. You've preached it from the pulpit, I'm sure. If you haven't, this way, you have some way similar. So anyways, the great white throne said, him who sat upon it, for whose presence earth and heaven fled away, and no place was found in them. By the way, earth and heaven is the old covenant. That's what fled away. Remember, Jesus said, heaven and earth will be destroyed, but my words will remain. That's what he was talking about. He wasn't talking about a physical planet. I saw the dead, the great and the small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged from the things which were written in those books according to their deeds. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it. And death and Hades gave up the dead which were in them. When does death and Hades give up the dead which is in them? At the time that Jerusalem is surrounded and destroyed. We were already read it. What was that? Verse 7, 8, and 9. We already read it. Death and Hades are thrown into the lake that is destroyed. Now listen to this, or the lake of fire. Lost my place. Verse 14, then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire, and anyone's name was not found written in the book of life. He was thrown into the lake of fire. This is judgment. This is the great white judgment. However that goes.
White throne.
White throne. There we go. White throne judgment. Now, we can't get around this. Here's our time statements. This is what the prophecy says. And then we see the New Jerusalem coming down from heaven. All of these events follow the 7 feasts of Yahweh as outlined in Leviticus 23. And they all happen exactly the same. And you can't have a pronunciation, according to Leviticus 9, of the sins, of the forgiveness of the sins, until the priest comes out and says, Yahweh accepted it. So when Jesus, being our high priest, ascended in heaven from Acts chapter 1, and then he's our high priest, he's making the sacrifice. That's what Hebrews 9 says, right? We just read that. We were just right there. So he goes and he presents his blood, the perfect lamb, the perfect sacrifice, the last one that ever needs to be made before the Father. And then when he comes back, salvation comes. Now let's look. Let's go back to Hebrews 9 and wrap this up real quick, and then I'm going to shut up, Trent. I'm so sorry. So Hebrews chapter 9, and you notice here in verse 26, it says, otherwise he would have needed to have suffered often since the foundation of the world, but now, once at the consummation of the ages. So what's the consummation of the ages? It's when he suffered and died. So there's when our consummation of the ages is. What's that mean? This is at the time when the old law is coming to an end, and the new law is being perfected and matured, and the church is being built. Remember Matthew 16:18? Jesus said, I will build my church, and the gates of Hades, not hell, Hades is correct, shall not prevail against it. Think about this. At the time when the church was perfect and complete, Jesus said, I'm going to build my church. This wasn't a prefab house. This was a stick-framed house. And he was the chief cornerstone. And he was the foundation and the apostles. And then it was being built up unto a holy priesthood. And every part supplied its part. It was coming together. And then when it was mature, according to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, all that old stuff, when that was our tutor as a child, was done away. And what happened at that time? Well, let's keep reading. Verse 27. Inasmuch as it appointed for man once to die, after this comes judgment. So Christ also, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, so when he came, that's what we just read, verse 26, will appear a second time for salvation without reference to sin. See, that's the reason you believe you go to the Hadean realm, is because you believe you can't be saved. The Hadean realm was to hold the souls of people who couldn't be saved. They were separated from Yahweh because of their sins. Isaiah 59 verses 1 and 2. This is a proof that everything culminated in 70. Now, we can look back and say, from a historical standpoint, 70 is when it happened. They didn't know it was going to be 70. They knew it would be in their lifetime because Jesus said so, which is another point. But heaven, if you believe that you go to heaven, you believe that Jesus and his blood was the perfect sacrifice, and it tore down anything that was keeping us from our Father. If you believe that you go to and that means that you are now seated with him in the heavenly, as was prophesied there in Ephesians 2. If you don't believe that, you believe Jesus' blood was not strong enough to reunite us with our Father. That's what Ephesians is all about, this reunification from... Okay, let me say this real quick. This is the coming to fruition of the two sticks being brought back together. Ezekiel 36, 37, 38, I guess. Hosea 2, the reunification of the northern and southern tribes, the 12 tribes being brought back together. And then the Gentiles being grafted in. Just read it, Ephesians 2. It's awesome. It's right there. And this happens all at the same time to make, in Ephesians 4, one new body. That's why there's only one body. There's not the northern and southern kingdoms, and then there's the world of the Gentiles. No, no, no. It's all taken away. And then God is all in all. Okay. I'm going to get a drink of water. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, one thing that we need to address here too, Jack, is that even in the churches of Christ, in the mainstream teaching, they're starting to teach that they're switching from Revelation 1 through 20 being already fulfilled, or 1 through 19 being fulfilled, and 20 through 22 yet to be fulfilled. Now they're switching because they're beginning to study because of full preterists like us in the church who are showing them where they're wrong. Now, the beginning of Revelation says, in Revelation 1:1, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him to show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass. And he sent and signified it by his angel unto the servant John. Okay, and then in verse 3 says, blessed is he that readeth, and they hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written therein, for the time is at hand. And then at the end of chapter 22, it says basically the same thing. Even Christ says, behold, I'm coming quickly. So, and then, chapter 22 ends, it says, behold, I come quickly, verse 7. Verse 10 says, seal up not these sayings, like John was saying, was told to John the apostle, and saith unto me, and he saith unto me, seal not the sayings of the prophecy of this book, for the time is at hand. So now we have another statement verifying that what was said in the first chapter, in the first 3 verses, was true, that it was at hand.
Yeah.
From chapter 1 through chapter 22 was at hand. Christ said, I'm coming quickly. And he says in verse 11, this is very important, he that is unjust, let him be unjust still. And he which is filthy, let him be filthy still. And he that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still. who are they talking to? They're talking to the first century, those people in the 7 churches
That's right.
of Asia.
The people who, some of them lived through.
Yeah, and who it was addressed to.
Right.
This was addressed to.
Yeah.
And verse 12, and behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give every man according to his work. And then he goes on, and John ends it by saying, what is it says? Oh, yeah, verse 20.
Pastor repeats.
Yeah, he
what he
which
said in the first
testifies
chapter.
these things saith, surely I come. Amen. Even so, come, Lord. So John sincerely believed it. Paul believed it. James believed it. Jude believed it. Matthew believed it. Mark believed it. Luke believed it.
They all believed it.
Peter believed it.
I asked this question on John Welch's program. He wasn't there tonight. They got on the subject, so I said it. He said, the guy that was filling in for him actually said that to be a member of the Church of Christ, you have to believe everything that they did in the New Testament times. So I asked him, we have to believe everything? He wouldn't answer the question. He knew exactly where I was going. And he knows that he doesn't believe that. So he doesn't have a position to argue. I want to take just a second, Trent. Powerful stuff, man. That is awesome. But that's what you get when you look into
you
the
have
scriptures.
to throw those time statements away, and that's what the church does in order to get around this. They either change the meaning of at hand. When I say at hand, I say that something's reachable, like this camera is reachable. It's at hand's length. Okay, something that's far away. To me, I'm in Indianapolis. Mooresville is far away. It would take me a long time to walk there. I can't reach out and grab it like I can this camera or that camera. Okay, so you've got to hold true to biblical hermeneutics. And if you don't do that, then you might as well, that's how come they come up with 3 or 4 different thousand Christian faiths out there, or different beliefs.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
That one's having a tough time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it was probably like that before you even did that.
Okay.
Sometimes you got to force them to reset. So, it's going to do what it's going to do. So Jack asked this question. He says, tell me how death has been destroyed in hell. Okay, you got 2 problems here. You're using 2 terms that are unscriptural. First off, you think death here is talking about physical death. This is not what he's talking about. I'm going to illustrate this to you. And neither is it hell. The scriptures call this Hades. It was thrown into this lake of fire. Well, it's not called Hades, but it's thrown into this lake of fire. Hades, I'm going to get this straight, was thrown into the lake of fire. That's what I'm trying to say. So Hades was thrown into the lake of fire. So let's use scriptural terms. That lake of fire was meant to destroy, right? Do you believe Satan will be destroyed at the end of time when the Lord returns? Of course you do. He's going to be thrown into the lake of fire. Rendered, at the very least, you believe he's going to be rendered completely and totally useless. He's going to.
No.
That's what they believe.
I don't know any Church of Christ member or preacher who teaches that Satan will not be destroyed in hell. I don't know anyone. So my point is then, did Paul get it wrong when he wrote in Romans 16:20, and the God of peace shall bruise Satan under your feet shortly? Did he get that wrong? Was he confused? I asked a minister in the Church of Christ this a few weeks ago. Was Paul misguided when he wrote 1 Thessalonians 4? Was he misguided when he wrote 1 Corinthians 15, Romans 16? And the guy said, yeah, he probably was confused.
But see, that's their belief. That's their belief. These guys were confused and they were wrong.
Then how do we know
there would be
that scriptures is truth then?
If they didn't write these things and these concepts infallibly, we can't believe any of it.
They wrote it infallibly because they were given what to write.
That's right. And it all.
They were directed by the Holy Spirit.
Message.
Paul was even instructed by Christ. Yeah. Just like the apostles were instructed by Christ. So you're telling me that the Holy Spirit that Christ and God would allow them to believe something and be confused on something and then write a lie? Is that what you're telling me?
That's what they're telling us.
That's what they're inferring. They have to.
Go grab some of your commentaries off the shelf and go to 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, and you're going to see these commentators. And it doesn't matter if they're in the Church of Christ or not. They say, and they have to say this to maintain their futurist position. And they say, well, Paul was wrong, or at the very least, they understood him wrong, so he had to write 2 Thessalonians to clear it up. Really? 2 Thessalonians clears it up real well, says that it's going to happen in their time, in their lifetime, which is exactly what Jesus taught. Okay, so let me continue on with this. We're trying to make this point that if you go to heaven, quote unquote, when you die, technically heaven is your reality now if you're a Christian. So you realize heaven when you drop this robe of flesh. You believe that Jesus has already come. Because when the Lord comes, he destroys Hades. He's victorious over death. And so here's the question. Death and Hades are interchangeable. If you look at Revelation chapter 20, and it says that death and Hades, verse 13, the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead which were in them. So we know this is the Hadean realm. Death and Hades are used interchangeably. This is Hebrew parallelism. They use same thoughts in two sentences or two words or whatever. To illustrate this, let's go back to Hosea chapter 13 and verse 14. This is also where Paul quoted in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and what was it, verse 52, I think, or something like that. So notice what he says. Hosea 13 and verse 14. Shall I ransom them from the power of Sheol? This is New American Standard Bible. Shall I ransom them from the power of Sheol? Shall I ransom them from death? Which one is it? Is it Sheol, which is the Hebrew word for the Greek concept of Hades, or is it death, physical death? Now, think about this. You're going to have death and Hades destroyed at the same time. Let's continue to read this. Oh, death. Lost my place. I hate it when I do that. Oh, death, where are your thorns? Oh, Sheol, where is your sting? So compassion is hidden from my sight. So here's what you said. Here's what you're reading. You're reading here that death and Hades are the same thing. That's exactly what he just quoted and said in Revelation chapter 20. Death and Hades in verse 13 and 14 were thrown into the lake that burns with fire. Death and Hades at the time that Jerusalem was surrounded and destroyed, the beloved city. If this isn't enough, Jack, here's what I would ask you, or anybody, it doesn't really matter. Do you believe that the wedding feast has taken place?
No.
I'm not sure what he believes, truthfully.
If he's a futurist, he doesn't believe that. Let me say something too while you're
go
coming
ahead.
through there.
Go ahead.
Now, I'll tell you, when I was young, my dad made this full wall, from floor to ceiling, wall to wall, bookcase in our living room, and he did a wonderful job. My dad was an amazing woodworker, or is an amazing woodworker. He's too old now, but we had all these encyclopedias on there that my mom was kind of suckered into buying from these traveling encyclopedia salesmen back in the 60s and 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And so our bookcase was full of these books. And she would put these bookends to hold these big books up because, they were this thick, these encyclopedias, and there was volumes and volumes of them.
Yeah.
And I would go up there just to kind of play with it. I'd pull one bookend off, and they would tumble like
dominoes.
Like dominoes. Yeah. They would tumble, and it was fun. I'd put it back up. So what we have in Revelation is a time statements or bookends in chapter 1 and chapter 22. If you remove the bookends from either side and say they don't exist or they're not used for this purpose, then what you do is you create a whole domino effect for the whole book of Revelation, every bit of it, and you're guilty of of adding to or taking away from verse 18. So that's important. And this is true throughout any prophecy. You take one part of that prophecy out, it falls like a domino. As a matter of fact, what is it in Ezekiel where, is it Ezekiel or Jeremiah where God said, what is this proverb I hear in the land that you say these prophecies fail? Is it Ezekiel 12?
I think, yeah, that's Ezekiel 12.
Okay, and he says, he basically tells them that they're crazy. I don't know. I don't know if that's it or not. I don't know. Is it Ezekiel 12 or I don't know. But anyway, God told the prophet, he said, tell them that I will perform it. If I say it's going to be done, it's going to be performed. And when I say it's going to be performed. Now, if he tells Daniel to seal up the book because it's a long time and it's 600 years to 70 AD, 600 plus years to 70 AD, then if John is told not to seal up it because it's short, how could it be 2,000 years later? Think about that. Think about that. Just logically, think about that. If 600 years is short, let's say that Daniel was talking about the end of the world. Okay, and so is 2,000 years a long way off? Yeah.
Lot longer than he was told to seal it up.
So if 2,000 years is a lot longer than he was told to seal it up, and then John said it's a lot less, then we're talking millennium. And it's impossible.
Yeah.
So you render the Bible feckless. You render it of no purpose.
Yep.
So
you got it. Let me say hey to John Raymond Garcia and his friend Jeanette. They're watching tonight, so we're thankful that you are here, and hopefully you get some good information here. Let me continue on with this this idea of death and Hades, right? Okay, so in Isaiah chapter 25, this is not Moab. Sorry, guys, this is not Moab. You're going to have to say that if it's Moab or whoever it is, it happens at the time of the wedding feast. It happens at the time when there's no more tears or pain or sorrow. Ready for this?
it's Ezekiel 13. I'm sorry.
13.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Isaiah chapter 25, right? So here's what it says. O Lord, you are my God. I will exalt you. This is verse 1. I will give thanks to your name, for you have worked wonders, plans formed long ago with perfect faithfulness. So he's saying this is prophecy. You are going to work these things just the same way you has everything else, with perfect faithfulness. Keep that in mind. Perfect faithfulness. For you have made a city into a heap. He's saying a city is going to be turned into a heap. Okay, that happened to a lot of them. A fortified city turned into a ruin. Okay, there were lots of fortified cities that were turned into ruins. A place of strangers is a city no more. Okay, so this one is not rebuilt. It's a city no more. It will never be rebuilt. By the way, there's some paralleling going on right there. A city of strangers no more. A place of strangers is a city no more. And then the parallel is it will never be rebuilt. Okay, so you see that. He talks about the strong people, glorifying them, and so forth. So this says, okay, here's what's going to happen. This is the time. These are the events. They're going to happen. Let's keep reading. Verse 6, the Lord of hosts will prepare a lavish banquet for all peoples on this mountain. Well, what mountain? The mountain where the place of this city is destroyed. This fortified city that's turned into a ruin that will never be built again. The Lord of hosts will prepare a lavish banquet for all peoples on this mountain. Well, what? Who are all people? This is Ephesians. This is Ephesians. This is the message of Ephesians, the unification of all men, all made, all in all. It comes about at this time. Okay. All right. So all peoples on this mountain. A banquet of aged wine, choice pieces with marrow, and refined aged wine. So this is the wedding feast. This is what this is. This is a wedding feast. Every Jewish mind would understand this. You give you bring out the best. The wedding feast at Cana, you bring out the best. Whatever best is, we don't know. I don't know. You bring out the best. Okay, and on this mountain he will swallow up the covering which is over all peoples. Well, what covering is over all people? It's Sheol. Let's keep reading. Even the veil which is stretched over all nations. Well, what's the veil? It's Sheol. He will swallow up death for all time. When? When is death going to be swallowed up for all time? We just read this. We established the time when this would be. The Lord God will wipe away tears from all faces. That sounds familiar. That's Revelation 21, verse 4. And he will remove the reproach of his people from all the earth. For the Lord has spoken, and it will be said in that day, for behold, this is our God for whom we have waited, that he might save us. No salvation until the Lord returns. They're waiting for him. Why are they waiting for him? The Jewish mind understands when the priest goes up into the Holy of Holies, that's the Feast of Atonement. So they're all waiting. Okay, they're all outside the the temple. They're waiting. It said that they were to be waiting, holding their breath until he comes out and pronounces the forgiveness of sins. What was that? Feast of Trumpets.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
it's all three feasts happening at the same.
Yeah, they're all happening at the same time. So this is the proclamation that's being made. Okay, this is what it follows. So they didn't have salvation. It wasn't pronounced until the priest comes out of the temple and says Yahweh has accepted the atoning lamb, right? So Jesus goes into heaven, Acts chapter 1. The people are to be waiting. This is our God for whom we have waited, that he might save us. This is Hebrews chapter 9, verse 26. I'm sorry, 28. When he comes the second time for salvation. Luke chapter 21 and verse 20. I went blank on it, 20 something. But anyway, I think you're right. Says, when you see the city being surrounded, lift up your heads, for your redemption is drawing near. Well, what's the redemption? They're being bought back, purchased back, reunited. This is our God for whom we have waited. Jesus said, when you see all these things taking place, realize your salvation is near. Did you see that? Let me read it again. And it will be said in that day, behold, the Lord is our God for whom we have waited, that he might save us. This is the Lord for whom we have waited. Let us rejoice and be glad in his salvation. And he comes down, and this is the New Jerusalem, and he tabernacles with us. He dwells with us. We don't go to him. He comes to us.
Yeah, that's Luke 22:28. What you were saying, your redemption draweth nigh.
21.
Yeah, 21.
Okay,
Yeah,
you really have me there for a second.
Oh, man.
Hello, Dusty Rose, by the way. Good to see you. So I hope that you're seeing here that this point that death and Hades are the same thing. They're being used interchangeably. This is the same quote. It's being used in the same section of Scripture as in Revelation chapter 21 and verse 4 about the no more death and crying and tears. Why? We're not mourning for being separated from our Father any longer. We've been reunited. The Lord comes and we have salvation. You don't have salvation. Brother, do you see me? You do not have salvation. You are preaching and teaching that you are not saved until somewhere way off in the future. That's not the Jesus Christ that hung on the cross. I'm telling you right now, scriptures do not teach us that.
I'm gonna go back
just
for a moment, just for this prophecy. It's actually Ezekiel 12, about verse 21. He says, Ezekiel says, and the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, what is that proverb that you have in the land of Israel, saying, these days are prolonged, and every vision fails? Well, then he goes on to explain it, and he says in verse 25 or 24, there shall be no more vain vision or flattering divination, within the house of Israel. For I am the Lord, and I will speak, and the word that I shall speak shall come to pass, and it shall be no more prolonged. For in your days, O rebellious house, will I say the word, and will perform it, saith the Lord. Then in chapter, it goes, finishes up the chapter. And then he goes on to chapter 13, and he condemns the false prophesiers or the false seers for drawing the people away by their false divinations, and they're denying the Lord. They're basically false prophets. Okay, so read Ezekiel 12, 21 through probably all the way through the end of chapter 13. And that will explain, that's why Daniel's prophecy was so important as far as the time frame goes. And then John being told not to seal up the prophecies because it was a short time.
That's
You're
right.
telling me God can't tell time? He's the one that created time for man.
But that's what they want us to. That's what they want us to believe.
I don't know. Maybe I'm a little bit impassioned tonight, but enough is enough. I mean, really, come on. People throw away those paradigms and start opening the Bible and study it and be true to its teachings.
Yeah.
Quit believing just because a man stands in a pulpit and he's got a nice $600-800 suit on and he's getting paid $80,000-90,000 a year from a large congregation. Don't believe him to be true all the time. He is.
It's just man.
He's just like anybody else. He's just like me. I can be wrong. John can be wrong. Everybody can be wrong, and we are wrong on some things. But I don't think we're wrong on this because the Bible is too specific and too clear about this. We have just ignored these things.
But this is a powerful illustration. We've spent this whole hour pretty much, well, the first 15 minutes dealing with the computer YouTube mess.
Yeah.
But so essentially about 45 minutes on this idea answering. So here's our first illustration. How do we know that all prophecy was fulfilled by 70 AD?
Well, number one, again, because for those people who came in late, fulfillment does not mean cessation, does not mean that it ends once it's fulfilled.
Right.
There are several prophecies that ended historically, but have everlasting fulfillment.
Like the kingdom.
Right.
The kingdom will last forever. No question there. Okay, let's do one thing.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Let's do one more thing. This is the same topic, different proof. And this one I think we can do rather quick and still make it make sense. The simple fact that Jesus said they would all be fulfilled in their lifetime. Okay? That's easy enough. It's easy to say, it's hard to hear. If you've been taught all your life that the Lord's coming back, He's going to bring an end to the world, it's very hard for a person to take that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's easier to believe a lie that you've been told 1,000 times than it is to hear the truth for the first time. But I want you to hear this truth. Matthew chapter 5, verse 17. Here's what Jesus said. This is about fulfillment, right? It's Matthew 5, verse 17. Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. Remember, we were talking earlier about this concept of Hebrew parallelism or paralleling. And this is what he does. Look at verse 18. He says, for truly I say unto you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass from the law until all is accomplished. He just told you that heaven and earth here is the law. Did you see that? He said, so here's what he's saying. The law will not pass away until it's all fulfilled. Well, let me ask you this question. Are there any prophecies in the Old Testament about resurrection? About the return of the Lord, the second coming, the parousia, what we call the parousia? Are there any promises about that or prophecies? Of course, we just read several of them. Okay, so that old law cannot pass away. The old covenant cannot pass away until it's all fulfilled. Now, if there's even one prophecy left unfulfilled, then we're still under that old covenant. Jesus said, I didn't come to abolish it. He says, I'm not destroying it. I'm fulfilling it. Now that's powerful. So there's one proof. Jesus said.
Let me expand on that for a moment.
Yeah.
Let's go back to this, Matthew 5:17. This is Christ speaking to his disciples at that time. And who knows how many disciples he had at that time. He said, think not. In other words, do not think that I have come to destroy the law. What law? The law of what we call law of Moses.
Yeah.
Or the law that was given at Mount Sinai when Israelites were taken out of Egypt. He said, I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. This is what the church teaches, which is error. They say the old law was nailed to the cross and died with Jesus Christ. That is destroying the law, not fulfilling it.
Mm-hmm.
If the whole
Great
law
point.
was nailed to the cross and died with Jesus, it was destroyed at the cross. And that is completely foreign. That goes against what Christ just said. He said, think not that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. In other words, don't think that I came to destroy the Mosaic law or do away with prophecy or what the prophets said. I came to fulfill it. Fulfilling it is not destroying it at the cross.
That's an excellent point. We're going to have to remember that. That's a great point. Clearly, also, for sake of time, Matthew chapter 16, verse 27 and 28. Jesus clearly says, and so many people just want to totally butcher this, but here's what he says. The Son of Man is about to, so it should be about to, look in your literals and look in the interlinear, look at your original Greek. It's the word mello, present indicative active, I think is what it is. For the Son of Man is about to come in the glory of his Father with his angels and will then repay every man according to his deeds. That's judgment of the just and the unjust. Mm-hmm. Then he says, in classic parallel fashion, truly I say to you, there are some of those who are standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. So he says there are some people standing here who will not taste of death until they see these events that I've just talked about taking place. Now, the context of this, going back to verse 24, really probably further than that, but at least verse 24, the context is this persecution. So he's setting this in the context of the persecution that's to take place upon those first century believers. And he said it's going to happen in your lifetime. Mm-hmm. Now, let's think about something. If you were standing 3 feet in front of Jesus, or even 10 feet, and a crowd of people, and he's pointed to this crowd, and he said, some of you standing here who will not die until you see me coming in my kingdom. Do you suppose they would have thought, I got plenty of time, it's a couple thousand years? I guarantee you not a one of them thought that. That's not the way that these Hebrew thinking people would have interpreted this. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was just plain and clear to them, but it's not plain and clear to us because we think in modern terminology, not ancient Hebrew thought. Matthew chapter 24. If you were going to go to Matthew 24 to illustrate that Jesus said, I'm coming in your lifetime, where would you go? And we've got, what, 6 more minutes.
I would think that I would actually start in Matthew 23 and go through that, and maybe back into Matthew 21 on some parts, maybe Matthew 13, maybe Matthew 10, maybe Matthew 3 to begin with it. To
think about this. You just said it. You may not even realize you just said it. Matthew 16, where we were just at, 27 and 28, actually 24 through 28, is the Olivet Discourse. Yeah. It's just very, very condensed. It's the same constituent elements. Okay. Matthew 24, verse 3, the apostles asked, when will these things take place? When's this going to happen? What's the sign of your coming?
Well, in order to answer your question specifically, I would probably go to verse 34 when Christ said, "Verily, this generation shall
That's
not
right.
pass until all these things are fulfilled."
Right. So they asked the question, when's this going to happen? Trent just answered it, reading what Jesus told them his answer was. What was it again, just for repetition?
Matthew 24:34. He said, "Verily I say unto you," this is Christ speaking, "this generation," and this is what it means, this generation he was speaking to, not another generation, but this generation, just like he was speaking to in Matthew 16:27 and 28. "This generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled."
Yeah. There's no way around this, guys. Jesus said all of these things are going to be fulfilled in this generation, in your lifetime. That's consistent.
That's consistent with Matthew 16:27, 28. It's very consistent with Matthew 13 when he's talking to the disciples about the kingdom coming.
Yeah, exactly.
So he purposes the kingdom coming in Matthew 13, and John the Baptist purposes it in Matthew 3. And he says that he leads to it in Matthew 10:23, 5, 17 and 18, all of Matthew 23, parts of Matthew 21, and in Matthew 13, he said, "At the end of this age, Christ was born, lived, died, and resurrected, and ascended in the age of Moses."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where'd you say that? Christ ascended in the age of Moses? You just quoted it.
He ascended in the age of Moses in Acts 1:11.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Okay, absolutely. Okay, there's plenty more, and we're just kind of running out of time here.
Yeah, let's look at it this way. Again, I would really want to harp on this because I want you to think about this. And Jack, I want you really, that last enemy is death.
It's not physical death.
Not understanding what death is.
Spiritual death.
Anything.
Hades has been destroyed.
Yeah. Death, that separation between us and God is separated. It's done. The separation is done. It's over with. And the feasts, when someone says that, it tells me they don't understand the Old Testament. The feasts. The feasts, 7 feasts of Yahweh, were special feasts that were celebrated 2 times a year. First 4 celebrated in the early part of the year, what we would call spring. The last 3 were celebrated at the fall. So there was an early harvest and a late harvest. Mm-hmm. Now, on this Feast of Trumpets, they would blow this trumpets because they were watching for this full moon to come, because that's when they would start counting the days. So as soon as they saw, they had these watchers, 3 watchers who would go out, and they would all confirm, they'd all 3 agree that this was a full moon, and then they'd start blowing the trumpets. And that was the sign for Jerusalem to all come together and to assemble in the city itself. Then they would go in and they would take these little, like these leaves that they laid down in front of the donkey that Christ rode in on, and they would make what was called these little tabernacles. And that's what these people, like tents, these people would stay in, because they had 2 or 3 million people coming into the city and not enough places to stay. So, but they were told to build these little tabernacles or these little tents, and they would have a festival. This was a festival, and they would culminate at the end with the Feast of Atonement. So what God was saying when the priest went up and offered the sacrifice, and God accepted the sacrifice, and he came back down, the announcement was he accepted the sacrifice. So again, God was tabernacling with his people.
Right.
And so all of this is imagery. These were all done to show that he was tabernacle. He was living with them in their homes again. He was living in that temple again. He was there.
Reunited.
They were reunited with God for another year.
Yep.
Now Christ comes down, and God's tabernacling with us. He doesn't need a house built with hands.
It's a beautiful picture of the reunification of God's children with him.
Yeah,
It really is. It's amazing. And to diminish that by saying, well, the Lord didn't accomplish what he said he was going to do, and he didn't reunite us.
That's denying truth.
That's saying we're still holding our breath 50 generations later, waiting for salvation.
We are doing the same thing that the first century Jews did when Christ came the first time. And they denied it all the way up to 70 AD. They kept denying it. We're doing the same thing today. We're as guilty as those people are. Now, this Matthew 5:17-18 again, if Christ nailed the law and the prophets to the cross, then he could not have resurrected 3 days later, because that was a prophecy. And it was part of the law.
Man, that's good stuff.
So
that really is.
We have to find out what it is. What was it that was nailed to the cross that is spoken of in Colossians, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it tells us. It tells us what was nailed to the cross. The things that were contrary to them. What was contrary to them? Why was Christ? Why did he have to be sacrificed? Why? Because Hebrews also bears this out. Because the blood of goats and lambs could never, ever bring salvation.
Mm-hmm.
That was nailed to the cross. It was fulfilled. That ended.
It fits together so perfect.
Okay.
I want to address one more thing, then we're going to call it quits because we're way
Right
over. Yeah, we're way over time, and I don't want to wear everybody out.
I don't mind that.
So Jack says, as far as time goes, the majority of the book of Revelation has been fulfilled. But chapter 20 talks about the things that would be fulfilled 1,000+ years later. Jack, did you read that? Really? The 1,000 years are fulfilled when? Let's read it again. Revelation chapter 20, verse 7. When the 1,000 years are completed, there's no 1,000 years plus. The 1,000 years are completed. Satan will be released from the prison. When are the 1,000 years completed? At the time of the surrounding of the camp of the beloved blood camp of the saints. That's Jerusalem. That's 70. That's the last time it was surrounded and destroyed.
Yeah, that's verse 9.
That's the end of the 1,000 years. The 1,000 years is not a literal time, my friend. It's a symbolic period. So I think
apocalyptic language.
That's right.
We find this language all throughout the Old Testament.
Yeah, and don't give me any of this stuff where you pick and choose. The context bears this out, but let me say this. You pick and choose a whole lot more. I'm just saying. But God love your soul, and I do too. But it's just simply, here's the fact. The 1,000 years symbolically ends when the technical destruction or the real destruction of Jerusalem happens. This is what this says. At that time, when Jerusalem is surrounded and destroyed, that wasn't a one-day event. That took 42 months. Revelation chapter 11. That took 42 months, 3.5 years. This 1,000 years ended, as Hebrews 9, verses 8 and 9 teach, when the temple was destroyed. That was the sign that it was done.
See, this is what's disappointing, because I specifically read in Revelation 22 what John wrote down, which specifically tells us, and I even gave the analogy of the bookends at my mom and dad's house, of that big shelf of the bookends, the time statements, and he completely ignored it. Completely ignored it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll read it again. Chapter 22, Revelation, verse 6. And he said unto me, these things are faithful and true, and the Lord God of the holy prophet sent his angel to show unto his servants the things which must shortly be done. Okay? Then verse 7, it's in red. Christ spoke it. Behold, I come quickly. Then in verse 10, and he said unto me, seal not the sayings of the prophecy of this book, for the time is at hand. I went through that and showed you at hand. It's within arm's reach. It's within hand's reach. You can grab it. Then I went on and I showed you, and I'm just going to show you again. Verse 20. John says, he which testifies these things say, surely I come quickly. Where does it say 2,000 years later? Where does it say at hand means at time ad infinitum. When?
Well, they'll go to some passages that use these at hand statements and illustrate that at hand was fulfilled several hundred years later. But here's the thing. As far as I can tell, it's never left open-ended. It's always given a time statement. And the entire book, exactly.
You have to look at the other parts of the context.
The entire book of Revelation is the time statement for the things to happen quickly, soon, at hand. Tachos, with speed, hastily. So there's no way around it other than saying I disagree and I don't like it and I'm not going to follow New Testament beliefs. That's essentially what you have to do.
It's sad. It's sad, and I ask, especially preachers, I ask, or elders, because the elders seem to be more stiff-necked about this than anybody. Why? What threat is it to you if you know the truth? What threat? Oh, you lose your job? That's the threat?
Yeah.
That's the threat. That's why they won't see this. It's why they keep pushing it to the side. The elders know that as soon as they say this, the congregation is going to get them out of there. So it's all about power and money.
Yeah, a lot of it.
I'd say about 70% of it's power and money. The rest of it is pure.
I don't doubt that there are people that are genuine. There has to be, but they're just.
I don't know anymore. There's too much information out there. It's almost willful now.
Well, we're exposed to it every day. So I mean.
Well, they need to get exposed to the truth.
But they are too. Every time they open their Bible, they're exposed just as much as we are. So the problem is, and here's the problem, guys. The problem lies in the fact that you have believed the lie. You believed the lie. And you have bought into what everybody is saying instead of what the Bible is saying. And therein lies the necessity. You have to follow what the scriptures say in everything. So that's that. Well, about ready? Call it quits?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you like crazy being with us tonight. I have to say I have a tremendous amount of respect. And I know some people have a problem with that word, but I'm not using it that way. I have a respect for anyone who is willing to open the pages of the Bible and to look and see what it has to say and then to follow it, to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. And that's what we're trying to do. If you can show us we're wrong, hey, we're going to change. But don't think it's going to be easy. And you shouldn't want it to be easy. If you've got the truth, it should be powerful enough. If I've got the truth, it should be powerful enough. And you should be willing as much as you should be expecting me to change too, and Trent, right? So we need to just be willing, hey, if it's there, we're going to change, which I did. And it was a major, major swing in my life. And it really changed a lot of things.
Mankind is rebellious by nature.
Yeah.
And from his youth. I'm no different.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay. Okay. Well, there's just too many things here to.
Like always, we'll always.
Yeah.
Have to respond afterwards.
Yeah. So we'll do the best we can. If you have a specific question you'd like for one of us to address, be sure to let me know. If you're going to send it to me at John Watson on Facebook. If you're asking Trent, be sure to let me know that it's for Trent, so that way he can answer it. But otherwise, we would love to address those questions as much as we possibly can. Sometimes it's just so hard to do it to work and family and then all this other stuff too. It's just rough.
I want to say something about that. I know John has his own business that he runs. And when you run your own business, it's not 8 hours a day. It's 12, 14 hours a day, minimum.
With no pay.
to run your own business. Then on top of that, he's got his duties as a minister that go beyond preaching and go beyond Bible studies. And the fact that he does this every Tuesday and he also does some other things is amazing. I don't know how he does it. Well, now I know how he does it because I'm falling in the same trap, and I'm not a minister, but I'm up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning answering questions, and I know he is too. He's going on about 3 or 4 hours of sleep a day, maybe. And so I do apologize that sometimes I come off as a little bit stiff-necked or rude because I don't tend to, but I'm sleep deprived anyway because of back issues, multiple failed back surgeries.
Yeah.
But John, so you have to be. Please show a little bit of patience if they don't get right back to you.
We're all just human beings. Yeah. So, okay, guys, we're actually gonna.
No, you don't have to be a human being anymore. You can be a dolphin if you want.
That's how I identify. I'm a
Yes,
dolphin.
you're
Okay.
a dolphin now.
Dusty, you're right. You are 100% right. And this has been a horrible, horrible week for me since last week. I've got all these videos I got to get transferred over to YouTube, and I just cannot find the time. Something's got to give. So if anyone knows the lottery numbers for next week, wouldn't be gambling in that case, right? It'd be an investment. So just forward them my way. Other than that, we'll see you next week. We're going to do the very best that we can to keep you all in our prayers. And we're going to study some more. And we'll study again next week, 8 o'clock. And look for some more videos. We're going to try to do some more stuff and try to keep our YouTube channel populated. Go there, by the way, Restoration Movement 2.0 on YouTube. And send us a hit the subscribe thing. And like us here, share this video too. We're going to see you next week. So if you're getting here just now, go back and watch this from the beginning. You're going to like it. I guarantee it. It will arouse you it'll move you to do something. I can promise you that. Okay. You got anything else?
No, let's just study together and we'll show ourselves approved.
Amen.
One person at a time.
All right. See you next week.